Ever spend 20 minutes scrolling and still feel worse after you choose? That's the trap of too many options. Today on Insibook, we're unpacking Barry Schwartz's The Paradox of Choice, why more choices can make us anxious, slower, and less happy, and how to beat it in real life. In the next few minutes, you'll learn a simple decision diet. Shrink the menu, choose faster, regret less. We'll show you how to set smart defaults, become a happy satisficer, not a tortured maximizer, and use tiny rules, top 3 then decide, good enough, greater than perfect, and a 24-hour cooling off check to stop the spiral. You'll also get quick wins for shopping, careers, and relationships, fewer comparisons, less second-guessing, more peace. If you've ever felt overwhelmed by choices or kept hunting for the best and missed the good, don't skip. By the end, you'll have a 5-step playbook to choose confidently and enjoy your decisions more. Ready to make life lighter with fewer, better choices? Let's start. Walk into a modern supermarket and your first sensation isn't hunger, it's awe. Aisles stretch like small highways. Shelves wear the rainbow, 24 kinds of pasta, 35 granolas, energy bars promising a dozen varieties of virtue. Shampoo bottles recite poems about botanicals. Toothpaste insists that whitening and enamel repair and breath freshening are not simply outcomes but competing philosophies. Standing there, you feel the promise behind all this. Freedom, individuality, the chance to tailor life so closely that discomfort can be sanded away. Yet as the minutes pass, the promise bends into a different feeling. A little dizziness, a little fatigue, and the quiet worry that whatever you pick, something better sits 3 feet to the left. That unease is the paradox of choice. Abundance looks like liberation, but past a certain point it starts to feel like a burden. Freedom is still precious, but the cost of exercising it rises with every new variant. The more time you spend choosing, the less time you spend living with your choices. And when options proliferate, the standards you use to judge them rise even faster, so satisfaction has to sprint just to keep up. The paradox doesn't argue against choice. It shows where choice begins to devour the benefits it was meant to provide. To see how this happens, remember the simple mechanics of deciding. Choice is work. First, you need a goal, even if it's vague. Buy a pair of jeans that feel good. Pick a health plan that won't bankrupt me. Select a career path that suits my strengths. Then you gather options. Then you compare attributes. Then you trade off stretch versus price, network coverage versus premium, income versus meaning. Every step costs attention. Every attribute you add enlarges the comparison set. With 5 choices among 3 attributes, the mind manages. With 50 choices among 9 attributes, it's not so much choosing as drowning. When drowning starts, avoidance begins. You put off the decision, or you choose impulsively and hope for the best, or you outsource the choice to a salesperson, an algorithm, or the path of least resistance. None of these feels like freedom from the inside. Too many options don't just slow you down, they also change what good means. Imagine standing in front of a display with 6 jars of jam, tasting 1 or 2, picking the one you liked best, and leaving happily with a small prize for your morning toast. Now picture a display with 24 jars. You taste 5, then 10, then 12. You become strangely expert, noticing subtle notes of fruit and sugar you never cared about before. As your discernment sharpens, so do your expectations. The jam you buy might be objectively better than the one from the smaller table, but because you can now vividly imagine the taste of the alternatives, the one that was a bit brighter, the one with a cleaner finish, you leave less satisfied. Variety raised quality, and lowered contentment in the same breath. Opportunity costs do much of this damage quietly. Whenever you pick one thing, you forego another. When the foregone option is hazy, the cost is barely felt. When it's vivid, the cost becomes a constant whisper. That whisper gets louder as options multiply. A restaurant with 3 entrees is simple. You glance, choose, and focus on your company. A restaurant with 16 entrees turns dinner into a mental spreadsheet. Even while eating, your mind compares your plate to the dish you didn't order, and the friction of that counterfactual reduces your pleasure. This is the strange arithmetic of abundance. 2 good options experienced one at a time can feel worse than 1 good option experienced alone. Expectations climb as options expand because your comparison class, the set of outcomes you can picture, grows thicker and more glamorous. Buy a pair of jeans from a store with 1 cut, and you compare them to the old pair that needed replacing. Buy from a store with a wall of fits and finishes, and you compare your choice to the best features of every pair you tried on. Even if the final jeans are the best you've owned, they may not measure up to the fantasy you've assembled in your head. When reality is judged against an ideal synthesized from dozens of options, reality will fail the test more often than not. What's worse, improvement becomes harder to feel. Upgrades used to delight. Now they merely meet the standard you've taught your mind to expect. Social comparison pours accelerant on this fire. Options don't live only on shelves, they live on screens. You see the kitchen remodels your friends chose, the vacations colleagues booked, the jobs acquaintances accepted, the relationships strangers curate. Each is a menu of paths not taken, presented with the highlights polished and the trade-offs smudged out. When a choice is also a performance of identity, it gains weight. You're no longer picking a sofa, you're composing the person who would own that sofa. The more a decision announces who you are, the more it invites the anxiety of whether you've gotten yourself right. Reversibility, which looks like another form of freedom, can worsen this. The option to return, exchange, or upgrade feels like protection against error, and sometimes it is. But knowing you can undo a decision keeps you mentally shopping even after you've left the store. If the choice is reversible, your mind keeps asking whether it should reverse it. The result is an attachment that never deepens, because commitment never arrives. Oddly enough, people report more satisfaction when a decision is made unrevisable. Closing a door lets attention move forward. Leaving it slightly ajar makes you stare at the hinge. Underneath these dynamics lies a difference in how people approach decisions in the first place. Some of us are Satisficers. We decide what good enough looks like in context, pick the first option that meets that standard, and then get on with our day. Others are Maximizers. We want the best, and we keep searching until we're confident we've found it. The world flatters Maximizers. It rewards the rhetoric of excellence, it spotlights cases where extra searching paid off, it treats compromise as an admission of defeat. But the emotional ledger tells a different story. In a landscape of proliferating options, Maximizers spend more time and pay more psychological toll. They experience more regret, even when their objective outcomes are superior, because they can picture the runner-up that was better on one dimension or the unicorn that would have been perfect if only it existed. Satisficers are not lazy. They are practical. They decide how much excellence a situation truly merits and stop at the point where more search would yield diminishing, joy-eroding returns. Regret has two forms, and abundant choice inflames both. There is the regret you feel after a choice, the wince when you notice a flaw or hear about an alternative that sounds slightly better. And there is anticipated regret, the dread of making the wrong call, which can paralyze you before you decide. The more paths in front of you, the more opportunities you have to imagine future pain. Faced with the risk of future self-reproach, many people postpone decisions, ask others to decide for them, or avoid choices altogether. That avoidance feels like relief. It is not. Unmade choices are also choices, and they usually default to options. Chosen by people who do not share your interests. Responsibility makes all this heavier. With choice comes authorship, with authorship comes blame. If you lived in a world with 2 shoe stores and a handful of cuts, you could curse the market when your pair rubbed your heel. If you live in a world with unlimited boutiques and infinite filtering, any discomfort must be your fault. You should have researched more. You should have asked an expert. You should have waited for the sale that would have made the better option affordable. The more power you have to shape outcomes, the less room you feel you have to forgive yourself when outcomes disappoint. Choice was supposed to bring control. It often brings self-criticism. The paradox of choice isn't confined to consumer aisles, it saturates domains that actually matter: work, health, relationships, education. A young professional choosing a career faces a wilderness of roles and industries, each with its own ladder and culture. Every decision carries visible opportunity costs: the language you won't learn by taking that job, the city you won't inhabit, the mentors you won't meet. A patient sifting through treatments must navigate not just medical unknowns, but insurance networks, costs, probabilities, and forums full of anecdotes. A student choosing courses must balance requirements, interests, perceived prestige, and the lingering echo of what peers might think. In these arenas, the stakes are identity and future, not breakfast cereal. The cognitive load is heavier. The regret can be lasting. The pressure to maximize, to extract the best, becomes relentless, especially when the culture equates best with highest paying, most prestigious, or most shareable. If the problem is partly in the structure of modern life, it is also partly in our minds. The mind uses heuristics to simplify decisions. With abundant choice, those heuristics twist into traps. Present bias leads you to chase the immediate glow of a slightly better feature rather than the long-term fit that would satisfy you more deeply. Anchoring tethers you to the first number or image you encounter, MSRP, list price, compare at, and drags your judgment toward it even when the anchor is arbitrary. Framing shapes preferences. A plan described as saving 90 out of 100 lives feels safer than a plan described as letting 10 die, though they are the same. The more attributes on the table, the easier it is for framing to push you around. Each little nudge is tolerable. Taken together across 1,000 decisions, they become a life that feels designed by other people. So what would it look like to hold on to the gains of choice, autonomy, personalization, the possibility of better matches, without drowning in its costs? The answer isn't to retreat into fewer options forced by policy, nor to glorify scarcity for its own sake. It is to become a designer of your own choice environment, imposing intelligent constraints that protect you from the worst frictions while keeping your agency intact. Begin by choosing when to choose. Not every arena deserves deliberation. Some choices are trivial, their outcomes quickly forgotten. Others are recurrent, their structure repeating week after week. For these, build defaults. Wear a rotation of clothes that you like and stop reinventing yourself each morning. Plan a standard set of weekday meals and treat dining out as an exception rather than a nightly referendum. Use automatic transfers to decide saving and investing once rather than monthly. Defaults don't imprison you, they free attention for choices where the stakes justify effort. If a default stops fitting, change it, but don't hold every tiny decision open at all times. Next, decide your standards up front. Before shopping for a laptop, write down the features that truly matter to you and how much you're willing to pay. Before hunting for an apartment, list the 3 non-negotiables and the handful of nice-to-haves, and commit to stopping the search when a place meets the list. Deciding standards in a calm moment protects you from clever marketing and from the drift of desire in the heat of comparison. It also forces the crucial admission that best is a mirage. There is only best for this purpose and this person at this time. Limit the menu. The world won't do this for you, you must do it for yourself. Use filters aggressively. Pick 3 credible sources of reviews and ignore the rest. Sample 3 models, not 30. Follow a rule of 3 when possible. 3 candidates to interview deeply, 3 neighborhoods to scout, 3 cameras to test with your own hands. Variety helps at first, your first exposure. To a domain requires breadth, but once you can tell the difference between good and bad, depth beats breadth. This isn't about settling, it's about aiming your attention where it actually improves outcomes. Lean into irreversibility when it serves satisfaction. If you know that returns keep you mentally shopping, make fewer purchases that are designed to be returned. Instead, do more groundwork before deciding, and then commit. If you can't or shouldn't make a decision irreversible, make it temporarily irreversible. Promise yourself you won't revisit for 90 days, which gives the choice a chance to work on you. Commitment deepens value. A relationship grows richer when breakup isn't silently on the table every time you disagree. A neighborhood becomes home when you stop measuring it against the 5 you didn't pick. Constraint can be the midwife of contentment. Practice gratitude and downward comparison as antidotes to regret. After deciding, put your attention on what you gained, not on the shimmering set of what you didn't. If you must compare, compare to your previous situation or to the floor you avoided, not to an ideal cobbled together from everyone else's highlight reel. Gratitude isn't a trick to keep you docile, it's a lens that restores proportion by making the real benefits of your choices salient again. If you have maximizing habits, experiment with satisficing deliberately in low-stakes domains. Pick the first shirt that fits your criteria, choose a restaurant within a 3-block radius and close the app. Read 1 review, not 20, and decide. Notice the minutes you get back and whether your satisfaction actually drops. Often it doesn't. Sometimes it rises because you've silenced the chorus of imagined alternatives. Then, graduate Satisficing to medium-stakes choices and discover where maximizing truly adds value. You'll learn that your own threshold for good enough is more discerning than you feared, and that the time saved can be spent on the handful of choices that carry the most meaning. Guard against the planning fallacy by borrowing the outside view. When choosing a major project, don't imagine only your plan. Look at what happened to people like you who did similar things. How long did it take them? What did it cost in money and energy? What did they regret? The outside view arrests runaway optimism before it seduces you into commitments that will crowd out other parts of life. If you press forward and later discover you guessed wrong, practice self-compassion. Plans are guesses in disguise. Blame invites paralysis, learning invites the next, better guess. Bundle small decisions into policies. Rather than deciding anew whether to buy extended warranties, write a rule: never on small electronics. Rather than negotiating with yourself every evening about whether to scroll or read, set a window for screens that ends an hour before bed. Rather than evaluating each new streaming service, cap the number you allow and rotate seasonally. Rules shrink the surface area for marketing to manipulate you. They also reduce the emotional drag of constant self-control. The decision is made once, not nightly. Design your environment to reduce the tyranny of trivial choices. Unsubscribe from the sales emails that manufacture fake urgency. Arrange the first screen of your phone around tools, not temptations. Keep a running list of good enough products you trust so you don't fall down reviews every time you need light bulbs. The more your surroundings default you into decent choices, the more attention you can spare for craft and relationships and rest, areas where choice, when used judiciously, can genuinely enrich your days. Reclaim identity from consumption. When every purchase is a performance, it's hard to feel done. Shift some of your self-expression into what you make, how you behave, whom you help, and what you learn. Clothes and gear still matter, beauty and function are real, but they no longer carry the burden of proving you to yourself. When identity rests less on objects, shopping loses some of its drama. It becomes a means rather than a referendum. Accept that trade-offs are the grammar of life. Options multiply, time does not. Every yes is a no to the alternatives, including the option of doing nothing and letting a choice ripen on its own. Seeing this clearly doesn't make trade-offs painless, but it makes them honest. You can decide the scope of your work without insisting that a narrower scope insults your potential. You can choose a city without believing you've married it forever. You can choose a partner knowing that every partner is a particular constellation of joys and annoyances, and that searching forever would only swap one set for another. Consider, too, the possibility that meaning prefers constraints. A hike through open desert is freer than a hike on a mountain trail in the narrow sense of movement. The trail is a constraint. But the mountain gives you something to climb, SAT. Shape to your effort, a summit to share. Many of the best parts of life are like this. Marriage is a constraint that makes intimacy deeper. Mastery is a constraint that makes practice purposeful. Belonging to a place is a constraint that makes contribution coherent. In a world that advertises limitless choice, you can freely choose constraints that teach you who you are. None of this denies the real good that abundant choice has brought. There are more paths to safety, more ways to express individuality, more opportunities to find a fit for unusual tastes and needs. The paradox is that to enjoy those gains, you must resist the reflex to always search for more. You must trade the fantasy of perfection for the reality of sufficiency. You must take seriously the mental taxes of deciding and spend your attention where it buys the most life. Imagine for a moment a day built around these principles. You wake without checking a feed that will fill your head with other people's menus. Breakfast is simple because you made it simple on purpose. No ethics committee convened over cereal. Your wardrobe is a capsule of things you like. Getting dressed is a pleasure that takes seconds, not a referendum on your taste. At work, a big decision waits, and you treat it big. You define the goal crisply, gather 3 real options, draft upfront criteria, and set a deadline. You ask 2 colleagues whose incentives differ to poke holes in your thinking. You decide and make the decision hard to reverse so you can move on. At lunch, you walk rather than scroll, and on the walk you make a tiny decision that matters, a call to someone you've been meaning to thank. After work, you cook from your small repertoire and the familiarity relaxes you. Later, you purchase a needed item using your pre-written standards. You pay a little more than the bargain basement because you know what failing cheaply costs in attention and annoyance. You close the browser after the purchase rather than reopening it just to see. None of these acts makes a great story. Together, they make a life with fewer regrets and more room for presence. When choice was scarce, people needed courage to seize opportunities. When choice is abundant, people need wisdom to refuse opportunities that don't improve their days. Courage still matters. Wisdom now shares the stage. You can practice both. You can learn where choice enlightens and where it distracts, where saying yes expands your life and where it merely multiplies chores, where an option opens you and where it opens a loop you'll never close. The paradox of choice isn't a condemnation of freedom, it's a set of instructions for using freedom well. The instructions are simple to say and hard to live. Pick your spots, define enough, befriend constraint, commit when you can, practice gratitude, spend attention like the scarce currency it is. Follow them imperfectly and the world remains varied and bright without being blinding. A store becomes a place to buy food, not a test of your competence. A screen becomes a tool, not a life. A career becomes a path you walk with intention, not a maze that mocks you for choosing one corridor over another. You stop treating yourself like a CEO managing a never-ending portfolio of micro-optimizations and start treating yourself like a human being whose real aim is not to own the very best of everything, but to savor what is good and to be free for what matters.